bacteria. We've moved up to sheep, right? What is Victor's approach? I couldn't doubt myself. I was going to start at the top with man. And why? Because his imagination was so much exalted. Right? He's going to skip the whole idea that science is a progressive, one step at a time process. What is it? It's the will to power. It's my imagination being exalted in my ability to make a human being and myself to be known as the creator of it. That's what moves him. Is this a responsible action? Well, let's continue. You understand what I mean by responsibility? I mean, genuinely, I think the word responsible means to own your actions for the future. So a responsible person isn't someone who necessarily says, I did it, you should punish me or reward me. It's someone who looks forward and says, I own it. I'm going to project my actions into the future and try to make it better. A parent is responsible for his child. In what sense? Because the parent is going to make the child into an adult or help shepherd the child into an adult. A teacher is responsible for a student. Why? Because you need to learn this in order to get yourself ahead or be educated. So you really can't be responsible unless you know what an education would be. Well, here Victor is. Is he responsible? He's making a creature. What would a responsible person do? Think about how the creature is going to be integrated into life. Does Victor ever give that a thought? Victor thinks about the glory that will redound to him if he makes the creature. Not responsible, I would say. In fact, we have a word for that, irresponsible. All the more clear does this become as we look about how he proceeds. Continuing, the materials at present within my command hardly appeared adequate to so arduous an undertaking. Like if I was going to make a human being, I would look for the beau ideal of a man, right? I'd look for the perfect arms, the perfect legs, the nice hair. Nice hair. Right? And we just try to combine all of that, right? We'd cut off, wait till you die. I mean, if you have an unfortunate accident, that'd be all right. Take off your leg. We'll use your leg. Take off your leg. Hey, this is how you start, right? Get your hair. I love red hair. It's perfect. We're halfway home. Okay? This is what young Frankenstein is about. But that's not what he does. Where does he go to get the stuff? Random dead people?
Doesn't he have some kind of body farm? That's what it sounds like. Where he walks
It's called a graveyard, right? Or a body farm. I mean, one man's body farm is another man's graveyard. Okay, I prepared myself for a multitude of reverses. My operations might be incessantly baffled, and at last my work be imperfect. Yet, when I considered the improvement which every day takes place in science and mechanics, I was encouraged to hope my present attempts would at last lay the foundations of future success. Nor could I consider the magnitude and complexity of my plan as any argument of its impracticability. It was with these feelings that I began the creation of a human being. Never thinking about how that human being's going to fit in. And once again, this is where it helps if you're further along in the book. Does the creature fit in? What does he look like? He's called a monster. Why? Because he uses decomposed body parts to make him. As the minuteness of the parts. And why? Why does he go to the body farm or the graveyard? Here's the answer. As the minuteness of the parts formed a great hindrance to my speed. I wasn't going fast enough because everything was small. I resolved, contrary to my first intention, to make the being of gigantic stature. That is to say, about 8 feet in height and proportionately large. After having formed this determination and having spent some months in successively collecting and arranging my materials, I began. Whose convenience is it about? His. Whose glory does it redound to? His. He does it because he wants to be the first and he wants his own convenience served. Never a responsible creator. But he's not a responsible creator because of his own soul. That's really not a good word to use here. Maybe I should say his own psychological characteristics. The fact that he has turned his aggressiveness and violence inward. The fact that he is motivated by his own interest and not the interest of humanity or the interest of his monster. But you have to say this about God. At least he seems to have loved human beings. Victor creates them and abandons them. We all have bad days. And we just need to keep reading here for a second, all right? So where we just left off, continuing. What page are we on now? 32. 32 still in the Dover. 52 in the preferred reading, which I'm the only one who has it. No one can conceive the variety of feelings which bore me onwards like a hurricane in the first enthusiasm of success. Life and death appeared to me ideal bounds, which I should first break through and pour a torrent of life onto our dark world. A new species would bless me as its creator and source. Many happy and excellent natures would owe their being to me. No father could claim the gratitude of his child so completely as I should deserve theirs. Holy smokes. So let's be clear about this. Victor has options, all right? He has a more than sister at home. He eventually will be engaged to her. He could become a father in the traditional way, if you understand what I mean. Very white, baby, 9 months later. He could do it in the traditional way, but there he would have to share the gratitude of creating that child with a wife. He is going to be the most perfectly generous human being because he will himself, not with the aid of someone else, create a new being. And no child could ever say that I am thankful to one person more than Victor's monster would be grateful to him, if that's even a sentence. Victor's monster owes its being to Victor alone. A normal child, you have to share the glory with the wife. Victor rejects completely, it seems, the natural way of making children, that's sex. But in a way that will redound to his glory and his power, and a recognition from his children of that power and of that glory. Now, you can be a normal human being and have children through the old-fashioned way that I'm talking about, and that many of you no doubt have heard about. But Victor just utterly rejects it. And in fact, as we continue on here on the next page, he has to suppress every normal human sentiment in order to continue on his quest of creating this new race. These thoughts. Same page? Miss Howe is on the same page? These thoughts?
Yeah, so very bottom.
32?
Yep.
These thoughts supported my spirits while I pursued my undertaking with unremitting ardor. Just think about that. The word ardor keeps coming up here. Ardor usually means like you have an arduous love for someone. It's a form of erotic attachment and love. Well, this is where his ardor is. My cheek had grown pale with study, and my person had become emaciated with confinement. Sometimes, on the very brink of certainty, I failed. Yet still I clung to the hope which the next day or the next hour might realize. One secret which I alone possessed was the hope to which I had dedicated myself. And the moon gazed on my midnight labors, while with unrelaxed and breathless eagerness I pursued nature in her hiding places. Who shall conceive the horrors of my secret toil as I dabbled among the unhallowed damps of the grave and tortured the living animal to animate the lifeless clay? Skipping a little bit, right at the end of that paragraph, the dissecting room in the slaughterhouse furnished many of my materials, and often did my human nature turn with loathing from my occupation, whilst I still urged on by an eagerness which perpetually increased. I brought my work near to a conclusion. He has to become completely unhuman. He has to suppress human nature in order to conduct his science in the way he does. David Hume ends the introduction to his enquiry concerning human understanding by saying something like, this is a rough quotation, "Pursue your science, oh, pursue your science, but let your science be human." This is precisely science untempered by humanity. And the point here is simply this: the scientist can't give an account of his humanity. He can't give an account or defend his native land or the sentiments that exist in his soul, because he didn't make them. The scientist needs to go all the way down and build things up from the ground level up, not take things necessarily as they are given. What is his motivation? What is Victor's motivation to make this animal? He loves science, but what is more, he loves power. He is not a knower like his two college professors are, Waldman and the other guy. He is a knower and a doer, a knower and a builder, someone who gets things done in the world. As he builds the animal, he shows haste, lack of attention to detail, lack of caring, genuine irresponsibility. He's ardent in execution, impatient with difficulties, like his friend the poet on the ship. He's repulsed by the end product of his creation. He rejects the creature entirely. He becomes sick. He retreats. He abjures any responsibility for the creation. Isn't this the story of every science fiction movie we see nowadays? Where the computer takes over the world. We've created a computer, and there's nothing we can do to stop it. It's taken over all the other computers. That's Victor's madness. Questions? You can hit that. Thanks, we're done with that. All right, so that's Victor.